bit, but I think we're pretty good right there.
Yep, common trip.
All right, we're ready to rock and roll. I'll wait until I see the viewers. Once I see that with about 2 or 3, because there's no point in talking if no one's watching.
I got you.
So
yeah.
we can just kind of hang out here a little bit.
JT the Brick is starting to do this on his radio show now.
Oh yeah,
he's putting it live on YouTube.
No kidding.
And
this is one of the new ways I think we're going to see a lot of shows, kind of going in this direction. So.
Yeah, I just got an alert on my. I know that's what it was, alert on my phone that Beer Money's live with Gregg Randall.
No, you're perfect. This is where we do it. Hey, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back. Mike Idle here, hanging out with a huge guest. I'm really looking forward to this one. I'm talking with the executive director of the National Tractor Pullers Association, Mr. Gregg Randall himself. Gregg, how are we doing this afternoon?
Good, Mike. Thanks for having me.
That's awesome. Guys, we're at Louisville, Kentucky. We're live on location from the National Farm Machinery Show. We're in booth 3194. We've been unveiling the new diesel Superstock. We've been talking all things truck and tractor pulling. Really fun opportunity here because with most of my interviews, I'm speaking with a specific driver and we're talking, specific runs or specific classes. We can really dive in and kind of do a deep dive on all things Grand National level and championship level truck and tractor pulling. So I'll kind of ask the big question first. Executive Director, what's your day-to-day job? What's your role in truck and tractor pulling look like?
Pretty much all things administrative. I deal with all the event contracts. I work with our staff. I work with our sponsorship procure, Dan Schrayer. So that's been keeping us very busy. We got a lot of exciting things happening that we can talk about. Some things we can't.
Sure,
so we're moving ahead in a positive direction. We've got a new headquarters that we've purchased, and we're going to move into by the end of this year. So just a lot of things happening.
A lot of positive things across the board in the world of truck and tractor pulling. And if I've seen one theme over the past 2 days of speaking with pullers of any league or any division, it's that pulling is moving in such a strong direction. We were all very worried. 2020 hits. COVID knocks us right in the teeth. Are we going to have pulls? Are we going to come back? We get to 21, 22. We're chasing parts. We're seeing people, maybe not surviving it. I watched a lot of pulling in 2023. It felt to me, and now looking at the farm show, that we are back and bigger than ever. Did you get that same feel this summer that we are truly, for the first time, reestablished? And now as we look around everything happening here, do you feel that we're moving in an upward direction in the world of truck and tractor pulling?
I do. And, you talk about disposable income, what people, besides what they need to survive,
sure.
Roof over their head, fuel and so forth, coming to the events. I mean, the numbers aren't dropping off, and things are getting more expensive to go and play for the competitor, certainly for the fan to come watch. And there's a lot of different ways they can watch now. We had 2020 also showed us so much from the social media side of things. So, no, I think things are on the rise. It's a very, what I call an inelastic demand property.
Sure.
People like it in good and bad times because and it's a very affordable ticket pretty much everywhere you go still.
Yes, that's true. We were talking about that. I was having a conversation with some casual fans last night, and I feel that promoters and organizers have done everything in their power to keep pulling at that level that fans kind of know it and expect it. It's a great sport. Let's talk about the National Tractor Pullers Association, the NTPA, the oldest organization in truck and tractor pulling. Been going on for several years. How much pride do you wear? How important is it to you to just kind of wear that shield and represent this brand as your day-to-day job?
Well, it was a dream of mine growing up. My dad took me to tractor pulls. I loved it. It was bigger than life. The drivers were friendly. So I had the opportunity to come and work. I pursued a job and ended up, I graduated on a Sunday, 1990 from Urbana University. And Wednesday afternoon, I was in Galax, Virginia for the first event. It's been a blur ever since.
That's awesome. Yeah. So you stay busy is what you're saying.
And it's 24/7, 365. I tell the staff, when I go home from work, 4:30, 5 o'clock, whatever, a lot of times I'm making calls on the way home. I have Zoom calls sometimes at night, calls, some things to get done. We had a meeting in Indianapolis on Monday or Tuesday. I got home and, at 11:30, I was sending out some emails and then left first thing Wednesday morning to come down. So, yeah, it's different because you're doing a lot of higher level flying as executive director than you do like when I was sanctioning director or working with marketing or whatever. So, but it is, we got a lot of staff is excellent. We
Yep.
have the people we work with, the promoter groups. I mean, it's kind of like Olive Garden, you know, here your family. And
Yeah,
it's very
for sure,
true.
for sure.
So pass the garlic bread.
Yeah, no kidding. Hey, get us some more of that salad over there. Hold
Yeah.
the salt. But so you started in 1990. This is going to be fun. So fans, I love pulling history, and this is going to give us an opportunity. You've seen a lot of interesting transitions and kind of navigated the situations that come with that. So you were there for the years of the diesel versus alcohol, and how
Very
is
much.
that going to work? And then, of course, we're here. I can remember about 1997, 1998. I'm a young kid. I'm going to pulls left and right with my father, and he comes home from a pull, and he says, we're not going to a pull anymore for a while. And I look at my dad, and I'm just heartbroken. And he says, why? And he goes, I watched one roll tonight. You know, it was just so he kind of said, we're not going until they get safer. You know, I'm not taking my young child to these pulls. So what I'm saying here, you watch the roll cage development. And then, of course, we've seen everything now. Turbochargers have gotten bigger. The tire wars and the tires seem to be the biggest story over the past couple of years. Just talk to the fans a little bit about some of the most major transitions that NTPA has been able to navigate over the past 30 years, and then shoot that forward a little bit and kind of think about where do you think pulling's going in the future? What do you see happening from there?
Certainly, probably the most memorable thing from the 1990 season, as far as something that actually came into play 7-8 years later, was the Gene Donaldson accident in Chapel Hill, Tennessee. Gene got bucked off the tractor, started one wheeling back and forth, and he got thrown off. He was on the operating table and he had a blood clot, and so it was that situation. That not necessarily the fall or the hip, it was that, unfortunately. And so I'm coming my first full board meeting of the boards talking about rules. That was discussed quite a bit, and then they got on the thing of, will we see a rollover? We need to put rollover protection, but we need to have seatbelts. Well, if you put them in seatbelts, you need rollover. So there's a whole debate about.
True.
There was a whole debate about. So do you actually put a roll cage on them, and who's going to make that a liability? Of course, SFI at that time, they've been involved probably 3 years, and roll cage was just not all the mounting, all these things. A lot more OEM chassis back in the 90s.
Oh, and the casual fan who goes up there and he sees that, and I can remember in 98, 99, 2000, well, that doesn't look like a tractor. What's that big contraption on there? And it's what a tough transition. So, you know, continue with everything that happened along with that, you know.
Yeah, I was here in 2000, I think it was 2000, and there's a couple that showed up the roll cages, and I take 5 steps in broadbent. I had a roll cage conversation for a half hour. I have nothing to do with tech, but the rules will I get to hear how they're, you know, come about and some of the information behind it to try to help in that broad area, you know, of the situation. But getting back to the Gene Donaldson thing, that rule book the next year, they mandated you had to have a seatbelt, but only suggesting that you wear it. It was a very weird thing because they said if they said you have to wear it and you didn't give them rollover protection, then you know. So that actually evolved over years, because the roll cage. 10 years later, we have roll cages.
Yes.
So that's what came out of it.
Yep. So one thing that you brought up in there too that kind of made my mind latch onto something, you discussed an accident or an incident, we'll put it that way, at Chapel Hill, Tennessee. Now, NTPA, man, you've got 3 of the big dogs out there when you talk about sessions of truck and tractor pulling in specific events. Really like the way that you guys label and kind of distribute your pulling. You've got the Grand National season, you know, you're chasing points at the Grand National level. But then in the past, traditionally, you've had 3 pulls that within the Grand National you label as a super national pull. And of course, we're talking about the Dairyland, the Budweiser Dairyland Super Nationals in Toma, the National Tractor Pulling Championships in Bowling Green, and the Lions Super Pull of the South in Chapel Hill, Tennessee. So let's kind of highlight those a little bit. As an organization, what does it mean to have those really big, those home run hitting truck and tractor pulls? And what's the atmosphere like at those places for the fans who haven't been?
Well, they're anchors to our circuit.
Sure.
We always say you got Toma, Wisconsin, and then 4 weeks later you got Chapel Hill, and then 4 weeks later you got Bowling Green, and 4 weeks later you got the Inderley Pull-Off.
Sure.
And that's our season.
Yep.
I know, from the 4 anchors in the way, but we've got a lot of good events. I don't want to just make it sound like those are the four, but and talking in a just general way, but those big events, it's what's neat about it is it's a place where you see mostly all the divisions compete. So all the competitors are there.
Yes.
They do a lot of catching up.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little bit of reunion time. Same with the promoter staffs. I mean, I think sometimes the most forgotten piece of all this is that portion of it. These promoter and their staffs get to know all these pullers, and same with the fans with both groups. And so it makes it special from the fact of, you know, I can say, you know, my dad took me to Toma, and you know, I've taken my family to Toma. We worked Toma, part of the job, but of course, there's a lot of that with other fans. You know, they can relate to that, and they've experienced that situation.
It's a destination pull, and I don't want to undervalue. And I will talk about some of the other pulls here in a second, but I'll kind of put it this way to relate to your point. I live 7 hours from Toma, Wisconsin. I've got a 5-year-old son. I've got a 2-year-old son. At 2 years old, for each of them, we decided they're old enough to go to a truck and tractor pull. We saw to it that the first truck and tractor pull that my children experienced was Toma, Wisconsin. And I think that's what's special about the organization that you work with and how big truck and tractor pulling is getting. You know, it's worth it. It's worth it to drive 7 hours to see excellent pulling. And it's worth it when they've got 5 sessions and everybody hooks twice at these sessions as well. Hooking twice is a big thing that a lot of pullers have talked to me about over the years. You've worked for a long time. You guys have really established this pattern of, at the Grand National level, if we're going to go to Benson or we're going to go to Farley or we're going to go to Fort Recovery or Brandenburg, the drivers want 2 hooks. This has become such a great way to experience pulling, both for fans and I imagine for the pullers. Was there a time or was there a meeting where you guys kind of sat down and said, when we build this schedule, we've got to build in 2 hooks for everybody?
Well, and the price structure's that way. I mean, there was 3 one-day sessions that I just said thanks, but no thanks, because right now we kind of got in our sanctioning parameters a threshold of how many hooks is enough. And honestly, 20 is that number. Some years you have 22. You know, and other divisions need some extra hooks. So, you know, we do know that's part, and I think it's part of the future. If we could have 8 to 10 weekends that had 3 sessions or 3 days, 5 sessions. That would be a sweet spot, and have a couple invitationals. Mid-season and in the year. We've kicked some of that around. Easier said than done. It's a transition. All these promoters, you know, you think about this, and that doesn't get talked about enough. When you talk about the other, what you say, professional, add another 0 or 2 to the back of the numbers. You've got promoters that own, this is what they're in business for. You know, racing, you can have more than 1 race a year. I mean, a lot of our events, they're open 1 day a year.
Basically, you can't build a super speedway and have hot laps every other Tuesday afternoon. You know, when you're building these places, you have to recoup that and make that happen. You know, I love your thought process of the 3-day 5 session, and I would be remiss if we didn't. It's just fun for me. There's a lot of big pulls in NTPA, and I love talking about them. Rockwell, Iowa's done a nice job of really kind of leaning into that and knowing that that's a direction that you go. Good pull up there, one of your newer pulls. Talk to me about some of the things they're doing right up there right now. I know that's been on a lot of people's radars and bucket lists as a new destination pull.
Well, the amazing thing that they've done is they've taken a piece of land and built the infrastructure first. And then they've brought in the 3 days, 5 session event.
Well, it's Iowa. If you build it, they will come, right?
Well, it's right there, Field of Dreams. And so that's something they've done that's been unique to anybody else, really.
For sure.
Mainly people are just, it's, you know, fairs and so forth. And you think about it, getting back to that point about our promoters, largely by a high percentage, volunteer.
For sure.
They're not paid. So for them to risk 40, 50, 70, $200,000, and they're not making anything off of it, it's kind of an interesting equation when you think about how much the competitors invest in not only their pulling vehicle, but to get it up and down the road.
Well, and that's kind of where you have to have the balancing act, because pulling it's a hobby and it's a presentation for fans, but you can't leave away just with nothing. So there's definitely, you know, a lot of navigation in there to make sure that everyone comes out where they want. Hey, Greg, we're going to get to some of the comments here, and you know, I know that you're an executive director. Answer the ones you can, and the ones you can't, then we'll just move forward. So Tim Wolf wants to know, Ask Greg what to pull in Columbus, Ohio, September 2024. And don't let me only talk about Grand National pulling, because you guys have excellent regional pulling and state level pulling as well. So if any of that falls into this umbrella, we can discuss that as well.
I contract everyone right now. I think we're up to 78. I've still got 2 or 3 that are still making some decisions. Columbus, Ohio specifically, I don't have anything in my schedule since Columbus, Ohio.
Okay.
The Enderley pull-off is September 14th. That's an hour from Columbus.
Okay.
I'm really trying to think. We got several that are in the area, but I'm not sure about Columbus specifically. I'm not sure what that is.
Ohio's a hotbed for you guys. That's where you're based out of, right?
Correct.
It's in the state of Ohio. And then on the back end of your schedule, whether it be regional, national, or grand national, a lot of pulls all through the state of Ohio. Here's a fun one. We can just be fans for a second.
Yeah.
Colin Burkhold says, what class do we need to be watching in 2024? And I'm assuming they're talking, where are the interesting stories? Where are the points races going to be? And, of course, your answer is going to be, well, I love all my classes equally, right? What's going to give us some fun stories this upcoming year?
Well, I would say to me, honestly, it's a class that's growing. Light mod. Mod could double in numbers. And I mean that. From PRI to hear what I'm hearing, if I hear half of the people that are saying they're jumping in, we're going to have 10 in that class.
Talk to me about the decision to move that from a light unlimited to a light mod, and kind of let people know out there that is, I think starting last year, was a new class. That is a little bit different. We're not light unlimited anymore. We are light mod. Talk to us about what that means.
Simple enough. Back to the future is what I call it. Light mod has been around since early days. You saw Bruce Hutcherson, Lloyd McVeigh, some of those guys go from the 5 to the 7 to the 9, 12. Of course, you saw a lot in the 7, 9, and 12 with Banner Brothers and so on. And so forth.
Tim Engler, who would just keep adding motors on the Mission Impossible.
Exactly.
You would just sit there and take it and just let it jump from each of them.
So what happened is when we debuted that class, that was probably a dozen years ago. You can't blame anybody for building to the limit.
Yep.
We got a rule book. This is the limit.
Sure.
Well, but how many people were committed to build to the limit? And when you built to the limit, 3 engines on 6,000 pounds, awesome.
Yeah.
But you also have to have people you compete against, and unfortunately, we didn't have that. So it had some changes. It was cool coming out of the box. Had all these combinations, but there was pretty much if double nutted powers, if it ran, it was who's second. It's just no fault of theirs, but as we went down the road with the class, we got screw chargers in there. It just started to dissipate. And when they moved it to open it up again, the end of that week I had of our 5 that ran the class that was under the other provisions to make it open it up again. 3 of the 5 told me we're not back next year under the way it is. And so it kind of, Bowling Green held on to it that year. And I was like, buyer beware. I'm not sure what type of numbers you're going to have. So when this came up again, I said, I feel there's a need for the class because once you lose that, you may be going places, increasing this for the mod and unlimited. If you talk to those guys, they always say, hey, our number, don't give us. So I said, we need to do something. And this was just a blueprint of, hey, just make it a 2-engine 1471s. To me, and I was behind that suggestion, I will say. To me, think about it. It helps also populate the regional mod class. Where you can run 2 engines with 1471. Or you can run the Grand National like Bill Voorhees. Not say what Bill's plans are absolutely in stone, but you can run 2, 3. You can see 3, 4 guys are doing this, and it's back to the future. People like to see that.
And I really saw this take hold. This was neat. There was a fun story in about 2019, 2020, 2021, and we're seeing some of the fallout of it right here in Freedom Hall. Right around in there, we saw Doug Theobald, Ashley Corzine. I think Craig fell in love with that tractor and had some plans of his own. And then the Bollingers all kind of build light unlimiteds. And then they kind of messed around, and I think Craig was one of the first ones. He said, well, what if I take the screw chargers off, or I don't know if the lights were running screw chargers, but I put 3 on it, and then we can run modified. And he was like, well, no, the thing's pretty happy running modified. In fact, I think he won the farm show in 2020. And then we go to Chapel Hill in 2021, and you see these guys running 3 with screw chargers on them in the unlimited class. So it's really that back to the future. And that's fun for fans to watch these guys tinker. And then the next year, Doug Theobald says the same thing. And he's putting screws on his. And now they're almost committed to the unlimited class. But if they play with it right, they can move them around and pull in any of these different classes. So it creates for fun stories. I brought up the word unlimited. I'm sitting with the executive director of the National Tractor Pullers Association. There's one class that you guys have kind of exclusively, and that is the true unlimited modifieds. We've talked about the anchors of your schedule. Is that a cornerstone class that you guys are proud to have? Is that a big one that you put up that you just think is a really unique one that you all have?
It has been. It really has been. And a few years ago, we were having a hard time getting them to go down the track.
Sure.
And finally they kind of figured out the tire technologies, and now they're getting all that power to the track. They're making unbelievable amounts of horsepower, but they're getting it to the track.
Yes.
And
the new tires that came out a couple years ago, I think, had a lot to do with that.
Yeah. Word on the street is there's some time to break those in to where they really effectively hook.
Sure.
I'll leave it at that.
Sure.
That's what I kind of hear. So there is, Pro Stock has been an awesome class.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another, you could call that an unlimited class because, we saw a tractor out there last night that was incredible,
Let's go back to 1990, maybe 1985.
Yeah.
Pro Stock. That was that out of the farm, almost an economy level, just 10,000 pounds, nothing but torque, waller it down there. These are not your grandpa's Pro Stocks. That class has become the hands down fan favorite. It's a speed class. It's a power class. How incredible is it to watch those big pros and to have those guys pulling with you?
It is incredible.
It is.
I can't believe how much that class has changed in 6 years. 4 years. Technology. I will tell you here's a historical thing you'll appreciate. So when Bowling Green came back to NTPA, that was 1998. We all gathered with their executive board, and Dale Cole was on the board, and Dale was in that Pro Stock class, and he was part of that 1980-81 time frame of when the dude. And I said, so that was an answer to a more economic class for pulling.
Yes.
He says, no, that's not why we did that. I said, it wasn't. He says, yeah. He says, honestly, we were trying to even up the brands because Red had a pretty big lock on the Super Stock, and we were looking to find someone besides the light Super Stock, which was, because the weight was a different animal too with the OEMs. But he says, no, that was a way to make the other brands find some competition. And even as that's progressed, it's back. Unless you have
green ones,
unless you're a cross dresser, as I see the kids in the message boards. So
the big block John Deere is very happy in that class. We'll put it that way.
It breathes really well.
It breathes really well. So let's jump over. We've been talking. We've had a nice conversation. We've talked about NTPA history. We've talked some current events. We've talked some pulls. But we are at Louisville. We're at the big indoor pull. When you watch the show, do you swell with a little bit of pride every time an NTPA vehicle goes down the track?
It's fun to watch that. The more time has gone by, and I've always looked at everybody that goes down that track, they're a potential puller for any of the organizations.
I agree with that. I love that attitude. I love that spirit.
And if you talk to pullers that maybe don't run with us but has interacted with myself, they'll tell you one thing that I've heard Gregg say that to me before. Hey, whenever you have time, if you come pull with us, you're more than welcome. Love to see
you.
And wherever you choose to pull, good luck to you. But you're always welcome over with us, and that's kind of always been my attitude toward it. And there's been people say, hey, I'm ready to come. I've had a couple of people that won championships that have actually said, I like to thank, and they would recognize me, which they wouldn't have to do. Is very nice, but they said, over the years, he said, I think if you try this one time, you'd really do well and you'd enjoy it. And I've had a couple of mentions that way. So, but yeah, I mean, I've seen so many from 90 to now. There's been a lot. Go start looking through results of 10 years ago, 20, 30, and you're like, wow. And I run into some of the firmer pullers. I just saw Hans Boxer Jr. for example.
Yep. We had a chance to speak with Hans yesterday. That was a wonderful interview.
Yeah, and I mean, there's people you see, every year down here. So it's kind of a homecoming.
Definitely.
I always called it a great industry show. And really, the folks that put this on, Mike Witt and Kentucky State Fair Board and so forth, all those folks, they found a fairly good way to kind of utilize the sanctioning bodies in a way, even though not one of us, are sanctioning it, the sole sanction. It kind of makes it unique, and it works. It works. We're proud to be here.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, it's a great place where you can see all vehicles competing together. I think everybody's proud of what they're putting out there. And I think pulling's in a really good spot now. I kind of look at the three major organizations almost the same way that college football looks at conferences. Everyone's kind of got the region and the area that they're catering to. I like what you say. Always welcome to pull with you guys. That's absolutely wonderful. We're live at the National Farm Machinery Show. Come out and support us. Come out and see what's going on. We'll hit a few more comments here. Here's my big question I want to ask you before we start closing out here.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about pulling in the past. We've talked a little bit about pulling in the present. What are some goals as a director that you have for pulling in the future, and where do you just see us going in the next 10 or 15 years?
We talked a little bit about it with the kind of the Grand National, how do you differentiate that level to a point.
Sure.
And you will see some changes coming to the Grand National level. Some of it is out of necessity.
Sure.
With some things that are coming down the road, and some of it is also for futuristic. So, to have lineups and entries done prior to the event start, which you're going to see this year.
Yep.
That's different, but there's a lot of good reasons behind it, between the knowing the lineups and knowing who's been teched, who needs teched, who's still coming for parking, for all the data. A lot of people don't know at our event, we are supplying data on all the drivers piped into the announcer's tower. And it's really done at all of our national to some degree. And so that's important to have all that information.
Absolutely.
So it's just, again, refining the sport. Technology is offering and kind of asking for us to do some things.
Sure, absolutely. Having it available to apply from, the crow's nest, the pullers, the fans, the directors, the tech operators, everyone right there.
Right, exactly. So it's a big job to set up your trailer and have the window open, and we close in an hour and a half. And you got to have 35 vehicles all lined up, print up all the lineups, everything done. If you have a glitch, that's not a lot of time.
Right.
Delays the start, or there's a lot of reasons for it, and there's some specific reasons for it I'll get into. But anyway, that's some of the things. I think we've got a very good set of board of directors. We are doing things differently than before. It's quite stark. I will say, and really my whole background of growing up in this is through Dave Schreier. And I tell you what, I can just tell you, he was a great individual. What he decided, he was doing what he felt was in the best interest of pulling. But there's a lot of wisdom that still rings true today when we make some of the decisions.
For sure.
Made.
Definitely.
And so there's some of that, but it's exciting.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of juice right now, more than before the pandemic. Where are we going to go? And then we had the reset.
Yep.
And people are thinking
almost a blessing in disguise. Almost
Honestly,
gave us a way to reboot and hit some things with some purpose. And it feels like we're back. It feels like pulling is bigger than ever. The live streaming kind of emerged from it. The social media emerged from it. There's nothing not to love about truck and tractor pulling. This has been a great interview. I could talk pulling history with you all day long. I love discussing this. Title sponsors. You're an executive director. Is there anybody that you need to mention before we sign off here?
Well, we like to thank the folks from Case IH. I actually was meeting with them earlier today about a couple things. O'Reilly Auto Parts have been around a long time. We've got Hot Shot Secrets. We've got a new sponsor coming on, Beck's Seats. They're new this year. In fact, their banners and decals just showed up at the office.
Cool.
On Monday before we left.
Sure.
We've got Interleap fuel injection, Interleap pull-off.
Sure, of course.
Topeka Lubricants been around a long time. We've got Cowtails coming on board.
Yep.
We've got some divisional sponsors. Ag Protect One has been with us for a while. AKE Fires.
Yes.
Stop. They've been with us. So there's quite a few. I'm just making sure I'm not missing somebody.
I know. I almost. I was speaking. I was speaking with another leader, another director of an organization yesterday, and I want to give you the opportunity, but I almost hate asking that question because I'm not trying to set you guys up to miss any. So all wonderful sponsors out there. You know,
if I miss you, I apologize.
But Gregg, this has been excellent. I think pulling is moving in the right direction. I think we've got a bright future from everything involved in it. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to meet with us. Best of luck with your 2024 season and have a great time at the National Farm Machinery Show.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, sir. Yep.